Our little boy did not have a heart rate for 18 minutes and didn't take his first breath until 33 minutes. You see them standing on that side of the land. They were going to take it over, and no one ever expected them to take it really seriously until they did. Because don't forget, hyperinflation and not being able to get foreign currency into the country meant people lost everything. When we lost our child, you start to understand why some people struggle day to day on certain things. I sat in that room not knowing whether she'd live or die. I've never spiraled like that in my life.
Well, welcome, Laurence Blair. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Ridiculously Human podcast, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really good to be here.
Yeah, but it's crazy. We've been speaking for already like 30 minutes, and there's obviously a lot of connection that we have. And I was just thinking, you're from Zimbabwe originally, but you're almost sounding a little bit British, if I'm allowed to say that.
Oh, completely. Well, you're from that side of the world, so you can say that for sure. No, I'm well-traveled, should I say. So I was in Zim until I was 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
And then I went to international school, a couple of international schools. And so I think a lot of got a bit of American in there, a bit of British, and then I've essentially been in the UK for the last 10, 15 years. So actually, if you talked to me about 5 years ago, I had a bit of a black country, they call it here, accent,
Oh, wow.
Running that kind of area. Because that's the people I worked with. And then I ended up working in the financial sector, and it was all people, kind of people who went to Eton College and stuff like that. So it's a bit more posh. And but my accent's just, everyone from South Africa or Zimbabwe is just like, you don't have a Zimbabwean accent. Whereas most people here think I still do. So
yeah,
anyway.
for sure. It's always like that, eh? Like guys always give you grief as well about it, and but that's cool. I dig it actually. So but you messaged me on LinkedIn, right? And the connection, I think, was like that we both kind of had lived in Brazil and worked in Brazil. And you were there for like a few years I think it was also in Santa Catarina, working in the tobacco industry. Like, what took you there, of all places? Because you were also in like this tiny little town. Like it's not common,
Yeah. Well, actually, I was in Brazil for 6 months, but I loved it. I actually will, until today, it's my favorite country in the world. I just think well, I say that Brazil is huge. I think it's 13 states. But so I was working, they were going really back now. But when I graduated, I did mechanical engineering from Cardiff University. I couldn't get a job in engineering. So I did door-to-door sales for a long time. And then I finally got a job in tobacco, but it was a global position where I had to learn about the company around the world. And it was a 2-year training program. So it was supposed to be 3 months per country. Ended up being like a few weeks in some, many months in other. But in Brazil, it was 6 months. But yeah, it was in Rio Grande do Sul. So right by Santa Catarina. But we had, I went to Mato Grosso, Santa Catarina, Paraná, the whole 9 yards. But I was in Santa Cruz do Sul, Eu morei lá para 6 meses type thing. So, I mean, you've lived there. I mean, there's very little English. So, but when I went out there, they're like, you guys, you'll be fine. Everyone speaks English. It's fine. I had to learn Portuguese pretty quick to get my job done.
Yeah, no, there's almost no English, that's for sure. So it's you've got to learn, really, especially in your case where it sounds like you're probably there by yourself and you're trying to work, so you had no choice.
Yeah. Oh, it was a lot of fun though. I mean, I'm someone who's never been very good at languages, but somehow I've picked up 2 languages in my life because I've been in situations where you have to speak the language, otherwise you can't converse with people. So, but no, Brazil was just, I mean, I think you were also saying you really liked it. It's just the whole culture, because there was this work hard, play hard, but also just very relaxed environment with people, and it's very social. I love that. You don't really get that in most of the world. But there are a lot of influences. I mean, that is a very particular place in Brazil where there's German influence, Italian, Polish, the whole 9 yards. It's a lot of, it was great.
Yeah, I don't think people realize like how different Brazil is to maybe what you think it is, especially like you're saying there, like there was, the Italians came and the Germans came and the Polish came, and it's like you go down south and there's Italian villages, like there's little Venice there, and like you have German cities there, and German companies, and it's like what, where am I, you know what I mean? And then people that are like blonde hair and blue eyes, and you're like, what? It's just so diverse. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, completely. And then I went to a good mate of mine. He got married in João Pessoa, which is the top northeast, and it was so different. Like they spoke the same language, different like it sounded different, it felt different. Like it was no longer Sharati, it wasn't trying to say the English word for it, but steaks and barbecues
Tabasco.
like that. Churrasco, rhodesia type stuff. But in the north, it was all about fish and stuff like that. But it's the same kind of culture, just not the same. Brazil is so diverse, and it's a lovely country.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'll go back in a heartbeat. But if it wasn't for family, etc., etc.
Of course. Yeah. 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 And also amazing food. Like, I mean, the food there was like
Yeah,
on another level, fruits and fish and meat, and was like, wow, I was like blown away by the quality of food that they
yeah,
have there.
yeah,
So,
non-stop.
yeah. So you're actually originally from Zimbabwe, right? And
Yeah,
I think also many people don't really know how great Zimbabwe once was. Do you still have any good memories of those times yourself?
incredible memories. I'll be honest. I think the downside to having growing up there when I did was that I think maybe I've idealized it in my head, but it was truly amazing. Like it was an amazing place to live and grow up, um, and yeah, full of amazing memories, but also full of dreams. I think this is where I used to live by a quote called "If you can dream it, you can do it." And I actually tried to look up where it came from because I originally saw it on a poster in 1996 Olympics, but I think it was Walt Disney, like an employee who came up with it. But honestly, in Zimbabwe, it felt like whatever I wanted, I could have it. Nearly that American dream type feel. Um, yeah, it truly was. I mean, I'm going to name drop here, but if you've ever heard of Forrest Galante, he's on a lot of Discovery stuff and things now. He was my best mate when I was 12 years old, and he used to be on this farm. So I used to go visit him on the farm. We used to go play. I mean, literally whatever we wanted to do, we could do. I played a lot of sport, played golf for the Zimbabwean development team. But because of Nick Price being the world number one, there was a lot of funding in it. I mean, it just felt like whatever you wanted to do, it didn't mean it cost a lot of money, but the access was there. Um, Everyone got along pretty well. Like, and I'm talking races as well, because the whole thing of when it went pear-shaped was a race thing, whereas everyone seemed to be getting along really well. And then, yeah, I think the rest is history. I think probably most people know what happened in Zimbabwe.
And what are your thoughts? Was it like almost a coup, do you think, like with it going downhill and Mugabe taking over, or was it just kind of natural evolution of politics?
Look, I was young, so I mean, speaking about politics of then is quite different to now. I can talk about my experiences as a kid, right? I mean, when I got a bit old, I did read a book kind of written around what Mugabe did when he first came into power, talking about how he was going to give the land back to his people. That was part of his campaign to be president, right? Um, for me, it's not about exactly what he did; it's how he did it, which I just thought was so wrong. And I think nearly everyone in the world saw how wrong it was, but no one had much to gain from Zimbabwe, so no one really intervened. And it's so sad because all those people who were hardworking, who wanted to make a difference in the country, ended up being the ones who ended up struggling without a job after it. Um, and I mean, when it was all about the Zim war veterans coming onto the land and taking over, I'd go to my friends' farms and you see them standing on that side of the land, just that's theirs. They were going to take it over at harvest. And I mean, it wasn't a joke, but it was, no one ever expected them to take it really seriously until they did.
Hmm.
And it was just devastating. I mean, I don't often talk about that part of my life because, whether it was a lot of it's because my father was and is a kind of an agriculture consultant. He consulted a lot of farmers. So we're very well connected in the community from that side. Once again, I was young, but there are a lot of people we know who went through some devastating times. Some people are no longer with us. And a lot of people in towns and cities would resort to violence. Now, it's not like South Africa where you go in places and you get mugged on the side of the road for the sake of being mugged, right? People were just hungry. So it's one of those, they'd break into your house to steal food. I mean, it was not, look, once again, I was young. My parents protected me in many ways, shape and form, which is very grateful for. But it's not what you want to see as this is my country and I love my country and everything about it. And I still do till today, love Zimbabwe. And there's elements when you go back, you still feel that buzz. I don't know if you've ever been, but there's a buzz
No.
about Zimbabwe. Like
Yeah.
it's amazing. You just get this feeling with everyone else. But yeah, it's politically speaking, it's very hard for me to comment because I'm not, I was too young.
Yeah.
But all I can see is, what I witnessed. And yeah, sadly, just an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, there's what you said there about there's a feeling of places, and that's how I feel about South Africa as well. Like you you have to go there to experience it, to feel that feeling that you just spoke about, because it's the same here, but there's a different energy, there's a different buzz, and it still exists to this day, right? I mean, I've literally come home a couple months ago after not being here for 5 years, and I'm like, man, it feels good to be home. Like there's something special about our countries, and maybe it's just because I don't know, maybe we're a bit more patriotic, and we have such good memories about it, so that we do feel that way just when we land. But
Yeah,
I think there's something special about this part of Africa, at
I
least.
do. And I don't know if you have the same saying in South Africa, but make a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Like for us,
Boer
because
maak 'n plan. But
yeah, nearly everything, things go wrong in Africa. Like let's face it. Even if you consider South Africa half Africa, you're pretty first world over there. But when things go wrong, you just make a plan, and I love that. I love that, and so I think that's part of that feeling. You go there, and even when things are not going great, people make a plan,
mm-hmm.
and it's never just drop everything going, "Oh, I can't believe that's the end of it. I just give up. It's always just how we're going to go to the next bit. And that could be as simple as, anything. And I love that feeling with everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And but I mean, yeah, like to be honest, with you, I came back here on holiday, but we've decided to stay. So, all this stuff that you hear in the news about how bad it is and everything, like okay, fair enough, it's got its issues, but everywhere else does as well, bud. We spent the first 9 months well, not the first night, we spent the previous 9 months traveling the world. So it's not like we don't have anything to compare against in terms of recent history. And that's how we felt about South Africa. Like, wow, okay, this is special. Of course, it's not everywhere. Like, there's certain pockets and places, but yeah, it definitely feels like a good place to be right now. So when you left Zimbabwe, like what was the reasoning for leaving it? Was it like danger or other reasons?
No, so like I said, my father was an agricultural consultant, so he consulted farmers. So when there were no real commercial farmers left, there was no work left. So
Wow.
now, very fortunately, my father's a very well-known agricultural consultant. So some of the top farmers in Zimbabwe were his consultants. So when they ended up taking jobs all over the world, his name got spread and he got offered roles in all sorts of places. And he actually took a role in tobacco in Malawi. And the idea was, let's stay close to home. So if Zimbabwe rights itself, because everyone always thought, Mugabe might not make it much longer. Like he's doing all sorts of wacky things. Who knows how long he's going to? And so we went to Malawi, hoping that we could pop back to Zimbabwe at some point. And he started in quite a modest position in that role, but I think my father's an incredible, incredible man, and he got promoted many times in the course of the last 16 years of his career. And I think there's so many guys from Zimbabwe who were doing well, who lost nearly everything. Because don't forget, hyperinflation and not being able to get foreign currency into the country meant people lost everything, right? Think about we were teenagers. So whether it's their pensions or our education funds that they set up to go to university, everything gone, worth nothing. And as a parent, like I can only imagine how devastating that is to be like, okay, well, we had it all set up. Now, can we even send our kids to university? Like, what's the game plan? And no, fair play to my parents. They moved to Malawi and we stayed in Zimbabwe. I went to a home school. My brother continued in a private school, and the other brother continued in his school as well. But actually, no, he graduated. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it was one of those. He took a role in there, and it was a company that paid for education, um, which is great. So whether he was mid-level management or senior management, education was paid for their kids. So that allowed me to go to an international school. So I moved to Malawi 6 months later, and I went to international school.
Cool.
Yeah.
Whereabouts were you in Malawi? I've been there once before, like Longwear and what's the capital?
Ooh,
Uh,
that's a tough one because I think it's in the middle of nowhere. So Lilongwe
uh,
is where I was, which is
yes.
kind
Okay.
of It's a bit like Johannesburg. It's kind of the business capital, I believe.
Yeah.
Blantyre. What's the name
Blantyre,
of
that's
the?
the other one.
I can't remember. I think there is another place that's the. Anyway, well, I'd have to look that up. That's testing my geography. I should know it. Um, but yeah, I was in Lilongwe for 3 years. So 2 of those years, well, yeah, 2 of those years, my parents were there, and then they moved to Tanzania. And by that time, I was a lucky kid because in Malawi, you could only get a driver's license at 18, whereas I'm from Zimbabwe, you have to be 16. So I flew back to Zim, went to Kwekwe, got my license, and so I was that young kid who had a license, which was great. So I took all my mates out every weekend. We went to the lake, which if you've ever been to Malawi, Lake Malawi is incredible. So we went there a lot of weekends, and yeah. So when my parents left, they said, "Well, stay with a mate of ours he was a young bachelor. Well, he was 46 years old. He's a bachelor, epic guy. But he was there 2 nights a week. So basically, I got an allowance. Here's your car. Go to school. Do your thing." I completely messed up that year. You can imagine if you leave a 16-year-old to themselves. I just did stupid stuff for the whole year. So I repeated that year. I went to Tanzania. I went to a boarding school in Tanzania after that.
Oh wow, it's so crazy. Like when you hear about, you're talking here about growing up in Africa, really, and I mean, I guess people's just perception is very different, to actually what things are like on the ground. And I mean, it sounds idyllic in many ways, like growing up there and going to school there.
Yeah, I mean, to me it was. I think I'm an outdoor guy, so we're here in Northern Ireland, and they're like 8 months of the year we just don't want to be outside. Like, and you look at all the schools, and they're kind of designed to be indoors most of the time. Whereas I cannot remember wanting to ever be indoors. I was outdoors all day, every day. I think the stress of Africa comes in when you're an adult, because it's all about getting stuff done, right? So if you expect things to be done on time, um, at price, like you have to have some serious patience. So like I'm okay with it because I'm used to it. Whereas an outsider coming in, I think they go crazy. I know my wife struggles with it, although she's very good at it. I think she struggles with it. As you'd expect, you come from a high performing background, and you expect things done on time at the right price. But yeah, no, growing up, it was idyllic. Then again, I'm very fortunate of our situation, right? So there was a time where we didn't have everything, but we were always comfortable, right? And when we weren't in the best position, many people weren't as well. So we were in it together, right? So um, yeah, I think yeah, really, really, really special, really good. I played a lot of sport as a kid, so
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. Don't know what it was like where you were.
Yeah. I
Probably
mean,
similar.
yeah, growing up in South Africa was amazing, but and like I said, like it's just an outdoor lifestyle. And sport here is like it's part of your DNA, I mean, what was at least, I think it's changed a bit, but like growing up, you almost had to, do sport to sort of fit in some ways, it was just how schools are designed here. So yeah, I loved it as well. I was just wondering, do you look back, or do you, maybe your parents more, do they look back with any like, oh man, it's like it's really unfortunate that we had to leave, and like do they hold any sort of, I don't know, anger in them, or you know what I mean? I mean,
I don't know. I think my parents aren't that type. Well,
yeah,
I hope you don't mind. We're a Christian family, right? So I think forgiveness is quite at the top of that list. But I don't think my mother would go back. I don't think. I think she's trying to. There are too many. We'll see if she ever listens to this, and she doesn't like me saying this out loud. But um, there's so many negative things that happen there. It's nearly easier to turn the page and just not revisit it. Um, Now, I'm not talking. My father's not one to share too much on this stuff, right? But I have a feeling it's probably similar to me. I'd go back tomorrow, if it was just me, right? Would I? I think because of Zimbabwe, specifically Zimbabwe, I would be too concerned about what could happen for my family. Like to lose everything is devastating. But for that feeling, like we were talking about that vibe, that feeling when you're in the country is so amazing. Like I would go back in a heartbeat just for that. If I go to Vic Falls for a long weekend, or go to Kariba on a houseboat, um, teach your kids to fish, and oh no, everything about Zim is just unreal.
And
But it has its challenges.
is it the type of place you can go back to now and actually still do those things? Like,
Oh yeah,
it's still obviously functioning and those things are still like
yeah,
possible.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've only been back probably a handful of times since we left, and I'm talking probably 5 or 6 times in, wow, it's nearly 20 years now. Is it? Yeah. Wow, 20 years. Um, and it's different. Um, but all the things are still there. Um, yeah. I mean, you have some real committed guys who've stuck it out through the whole thing. Um, so it's not probably the exact same, but there's elements of everything that's still there. So, and look, you can't take away the natural beauty of it. If you go to Nyanga and Kwangi and all that, I mean, it's all still amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing. I mean, nature's kind of going to be there, like no matter how much we try and destroy it slash destroy ourselves, she will always thrive, which
Yeah, I
is
mean,
which is
the
kind of a
last time
nice
I
thing.
actually went, I went from Zambia. Now Zambia have like a lot of its wildlife is gone and all the rest. But whereas you literally cross the border from Zambia to Zimbabwe, and all of a sudden you've got zebras and all sorts of stuff literally at the border.
Hmm.
So it goes from like very little wildlife to loads, and it's awesome.
And what's the feeling there now? Do you know? Like, I mean, do you have any mates there? Do you keep in touch with what's going on? Do you think there's like, is there still like a little sense of hope? I don't know.
Hey, I've got some friends. I don't talk to them that frequently. I got an uncle and aunt who's still there. They live there. I honestly think they just love the feeling of Zimbabwe, and they still got a lot of their close mates who are still there, and so you live in a bubble, you're right. So, I mean, I think everyone in their life has a bubble that they live in. And then the more they explore, like yourself, who's really traveled the world, the bigger your bubble and the more you can be understanding of other people. Um, Whereas it's such a lovely little bubble. I'd love to go back into it. So, some people are sticking it out and loving it. Yeah, it is possible.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I really like to sort of talk about with people is like reinvention. And one of the things that you said to me at some point in your corporate career, you got bullied, um, and you decided to leave because obviously you're being bullied. What sort of bullying were they doing to you?
Wow. So I was in the tobacco industry, and they hadn't hired global trainees like hardly. I think it had been 10 years since they last hired one because the idea of a global trainee, because they operated in over 30 countries, and I think it was well over 6,000 employees. So the idea is that you'll be a future director. So you'll go around the world learning about the company in and out, and that way you'll be kind of on a fast track. So if you have a country trainee, you're kind of targeting senior management of the country. Global trainees are future directors of this company. Is the idea. And so for nearly 2 years, I was kind of like, it felt like I was a golden boy because they kept throwing me great new fun things to do, and I had a lot of fun. And then I ended up getting now my boss was probably the third in line of this massive corporation. It was the biggest merchant in the world of tobacco. So this is not cigarette manufacturers. This is dealing with the farmers, processing it in a factory and then selling it to a cigarette manufacturer. And he was head of agronomy globally, and he was my direct boss because he just liked what I was doing. So he basically had sent me out to Kenya. They had a sustainable factory that they were trying to build, and for 2 years they could not get this thing to work. They poured a bunch of money into it. The idea was to replace cutting down trees with using agricultural waste to make briquettes, and they couldn't not get this thing to work. It was designed in India, and they're all over India. And so after 2 years, they said, "Look, you got an engineering degree. Why don't you go have a look at it?" So I went to go have a look at it, and instead of just writing a two week report saying, that's it, this is why it failed, etc., I wrote a report saying you could save this. Give it 6 months. I reckon you can get this thing working. So what do you think they did? I just finished my training. I just got hired by this guy. They said, well, great, stay there, fix it. And 6 months later, I got it fully operational. And then I wrote another report saying, well, if you want to make it profitable, you need to automate it. You need to do this, 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 and this. And they said, okay, stay there, finish it. So I then fully automated. And it was the first of a kind to ever be done. And as great as an experience as that was, I was a young guy, very little experience, project managing a new build of a factory, which I say retrofitting, but I was adding probably about 5 times the size of what it already was to automate it. But what they did was they put me a guy in charge of me. I won't name him, but a guy was in charge of me who was very senior in Africa, not global, because my boss couldn't. You never get a hold of the guy, and so this guy was in charge of me from a week to week basis, and I probably worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. But it was also so I was in the middle of nowhere in Kenya, where I had nothing else to do, and honestly, nearly every friend I made or tried to make, I felt like they were just trying to take advantage of me. And now this might sound terrible, but it was a race thing. I was like one of the only white guys in the area. We're talking, I think it was 2 million in that area. And I think I saw two other white guys every month, maybe. And it was in passing, right? And so anyway, I was there for, and I ended up being quite isolated. I had a couple of close mates, but I struggled to just openly like have a nice social life there. So I just worked. I just worked and worked and worked. And with all that work in, I had a big shipment coming from China on a truck, and it rolled in front of our gate. And basically, we delayed our project and all the rest. But this boss of mine basically made it all my fault. So my job was put on the line. They threatened to fire me. And then it was just one of those situations that I've given everything to this company. And the way in which he constantly just told me how terrible I was doing, whereas I'd done everything I could. But to him, it wasn't good enough because he just wants to see results. And so he kept telling my boss that I'm a terrible employee. And at that point, I just thought, I'm giving everything to this company. And no matter who I talk to, I can't seem to get them to believe that what I'm doing is good. I mean, I've just done what nobody else thought could be done. And I'm trying to scale this. And then they were talking about building other ones in Africa and other ones other places. Now, we did end up start doing that, but it just got to the point where this person just had it out for me. I don't know if it's because I scaled the ladder so quickly in the company. Maybe he had something against me. I honestly don't know. But it was relentless. And it made me just feel he was the only person I could talk to. And he just made me feel terrible about my life. So yeah, at some point I just felt like, well, I'm trapped. So put it this way. They offered me they say promotion. It was to put me in a house. They give me a house and a car, but in the middle of nowhere in Africa to do something that no one will ever see the results of. They offered me that role. So there I was, felt like a golden boy who was being given huge opportunities we just want to put you in a corner of the world where no one will hear or see you. And they offered it to me and I considered it, but I resigned instead.
Yeah.
So,
Often they do that, don't they? It's almost like their way of kind of managing you out, like let's pretend we are giving him something great, but we kind of know it's terrible and we really want him to quit. It's just like ridiculous. Like the
I think
treatment.
there are a lot of people really shocked. And I actually heard since I left, there were people who would have said, well, I should have just switched area. I should have stopped being in that sector. I should have gone into sales or something else because I was good at those areas. I also never really thought about calling out bullying. Like it wasn't a thing, and people talk a lot about it now. But what came to me was after I resigned, the guy who actually brought me into the company, who was very senior, came up to me. He's just like, Laurence, were you bullied? And I was like, well, yeah. He's like, there's so many people who actually quit or left the company because they were under that one guy because they were bullied. But that's even because he got results all the time, they didn't really care. And that was really sad to me. Or maybe people didn't like me, didn't say anything. So they didn't act on it because people weren't openly talking about it. But yeah, that was my, so I had planned to be in that company for my whole life. Like I loved so much about it. And it was a culture thing. It was more, we're all in it together, making a plan. In Africa, things don't always go to plan. Let's just do it. Let's do it together.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting, like people that rule through fear, right? I don't know, I always like look at my sort of corporate days. And I always wondered like how guys got to certain positions because a lot of the time they were just dicks.
yeah,
And I think that's just how they rose by treating people like through fear and yeah, just not nicely. And I was like, there's got to be other ways to be sort of successful and get promoted. It never made sense to me to be a dick as a manager or just as a person in general.
Yeah. And look, I've been through my own journey as a manager. Because when I was in Kenya, I had 25 people reporting to me. And honestly, all I'd known, I really, the advice I'd have to anybody out there starting their job, first job you get, make sure your first boss is a nice guy who actually treats you with respect, because it makes such a difference. Because my first three people that managed me were all very much, like that, harsh disciplinarian, get the job done, don't care about anything else. Like, I don't care about your leave, family, nothing. Just get the job done, be quiet. Kind of like you just said, kind of being a dick, right? So when I started to manage, what do you think I did? I knew nothing else, right? I very quickly learned the hard way that what I was doing was completely wrong, but it doesn't mean that I didn't start out that way, because I just thought that's how you manage in business.
Mm.
And it was the start of my whole growth as a manager. I'm a very, very different looking, very, even the way I parent, right? It's completely different. I do gentle parenting and all the rest. Like, but it started out as I do what I was taught. Very simple.
What does gentle parenting mean?
Well, as far as I understand it, it's just not. Wow, I think it's a term that a lot of people are using right now. Um, but instead of disciplining your children, I guess, whether it be physical or threatening, you use gentle techniques, whereas you try to probably understand the position that they're coming from. So, like, if my kid has a huge tantrum, I understand that he's trying to regulate his own emotions. So I will not cave in the boundaries that I've set for him, but help him work through that and be there for them as support while they're through that. So it's quite different to just, you've done something wrong, you're not listening to me, discipline. That's how I see gentle parenting. I could be completely wrong here, but that's how I've approached it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. Like we were chatting a bit before this, I mean, when we grew up, it was, like I'm just more talking about school and that, like you just sort of get a clap and or jack or something, and there was no gentle stuff, no like trying to understand what this person is going through. But parenting is obviously a different sort of kid or fish compared to that. But I'm the same as you, but I could never in my life imagine hitting my daughter. Like it just would never cross my mind. And if I hear or see, say, other parents doing that, like I get pretty angry myself. I'm like, this is just a little child. Um, they don't know any better, and here you are, you hitting them. Like it's just, I don't know. It could also just be me. Like I'm just not a violent guy, So I don't know. You never know what's right sometimes, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is just how cultures change over time, right? So, I mean, I couldn't imagine doing it, and I never want to. And kids they can drive you crazy sometimes, but there's never once with my kids have I ever turned to violence. That's not been. It's more. I kind of know that, from, just through life, like he knows how to get to me more than anybody else in the world. He's going to press all those points. I get that. But never has it gone to violence. But you talk about growing up where we did. Like I remember we used to have talks about in the playground and stuff of everyone was hit. There was no one who wasn't. You'd make fun of the kids who weren't. They were like, "Oh, I was sent to my room." Come on, dude. Like, really? But that's cultures change, right? Things adapt as you get older. I mean, I don't think the world's in the place it was. At least the people connected to the internet, really. But first world countries, Western world, I guess, it's no longer like that, and it's because I think we've realized you can still set boundaries for your kids without that kind of discipline. And if you have the choice, why would you ever want to? Like you said, I mean, even the thought of hurting your child, why would you want to do that? So now that we know there are alternatives, take those. Well, that's my approach anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, it's a absolute learning experience having kids. That's for sure. Like and the more you kind of are awake and aware to what they're kind of teaching you and what they're showing you, the greater the experience is, because it's definitely a fantastic opportunity to grow, because like you said, they'll test you and they'll push your buttons, and you've got to ask yourself, okay, cool, why am I feeling like this? Like, why am I wanting to react like this? Like, is this something that I kind of need to sort of learn and control myself? And I think, yeah, I mean, for me, it's been one of the, wow, most amazing experiences ever. That's for sure. And I'm only 3 years in, so can't wait.
Yeah. I read something recently. It was like if you think about even 6 months ago, the child you had 6 months ago is completely different to the child you have now.
Yeah.
And because your child is continually evolving and you love the next version of your child so much, you don't really have time to miss the child they were. And I do worry about that because it's like, when's the last time I'm going to get a cuddle? Like I got a little boy, like he could be a year or two away where he doesn't want to cuddle his dad anymore, right? And I'm going to miss that like mad, but I'm sure I'm going to fall in love with that version of him when he's that age and the next and the next. And it's such an amazing experience. And that's, we weren't sure if we could have kids at some point. So trying to cherish every single moment like that I can.
Yeah, for sure. And well, the thing I like about this part of our conversation here is like you don't really necessarily hear the good stuff enough about being a parent. Like other parents talk about, oh yeah, I know, that's your life, it's gone, and you're just like a taxi from now on, and no more sleep. And I mean, that's one way to look at it, but seriously, like you're missing out on like 90% of the good stuff if that's how you're going to approach this thing. Is a lot of it comes down to sort of how you view things, and I think that's a lot of life as well. You can take a negative view on something, a positive view on something, and I always wonder, like, are people wired differently, like from birth? Like, am I an optimist from birth? Is it in my DNA, or is it something that happened to me? I don't know if you've ever kind of thought about that yourself.
So I'm into Enneagrams. I don't know if you know much about
No.
Enneagrams. Right. So it's all about character types. And you generally look at 9 character types. Now I'm what you consider a one wing two for anybody who knows what that is. Basically, I'm a perfectionist about things, right? So I like things. And so if I'm in a positive headspace, I'm incredibly productive. I get a lot of stuff done, decisive. But if I'm in a negative headspace, it's one of the anger kind of personalities. I can spiral because although I can critique someone, put it this way, COVID hit, everyone has to keep 2 meters apart from each other. If I saw people not 2 meters apart from each other inside, I'd be like, how can they live with themselves? Like, how can you live with yourselves being close? Like someone set a rule, you got to follow it, right? Um, but the thing is, if I'm in a negative headspace, that kind of thinking can truly, because I'm a lot harsher to myself than the way I think of, how I want other people to, and I expect people to act around me being that perfection. Like, you need to follow rules. Someone set the rules, you need to follow them. But I'm a lot harsher to myself, and that can be very negative. If I'm in a negative headspace, it's a horrible circle spiral to go down. But then again, if I'm in a positive headspace, and what's good about looking into this stuff is I'm a lot more self-aware. So when I start to spiral, I get myself out of it. And I've always liked to think of myself as a glass half full guy. I'm that guy who makes a plan. I'm from Zimbabwe. Things go wrong all the time. Fine. We'll make a plan, sort it out. But that doesn't mean that I don't go through negative times as well. I mean, life is not always smooth sailing. I mean, as we're talking now, one of the hardest times in my life. You know what? I wake up every day. Let's try and make a plan. Let's try and make the most of today. Enjoy that 3-year-old in my life because I didn't know if I'd ever have kids. Enjoy that 1-year-old in my life. That's just the way I am. But yeah, some days it's not easy to get out of bed.
How did you sort of improve yourself when it came to understanding, like trying to get out of that negative sort of spiral? Because I
Wow.
can imagine, right, there was like a part of your life, like, up to some sort of age where you just let that negativity get the better of you, right? And I don't know, you did stupid things, or you got depressed, or I don't know, you made bad decisions, whatever it was. But like, obviously, the more self-aware you became, the sort of better you could handle that spiral. So like, what was it that sort of made you become more self-aware of your personality type?
Wow, that's a really tough one. Honestly, it's when I was younger, I used to have the thought of it's a choice to be happy. Now, I don't fully live by that anymore, but as a kid, if I was having a tough time, I'd be like, it's a choice. I think there's a way of people do a lot of CBT therapy where you over catastrophize things in your head. So, what could be if you had a conversation with someone at work and they said something and it triggered you, and you're like, wow, that person thinks I'm terrible, or I did something bad, or I don't do well enough, and I need to prove it to them that I, and you can spend the next day worrying about what they said to you and how they said it, where it might have had nothing to do with you. So, it's one of those being able to take the time and thought to think, you know, all I can do is what I can do now. And it's not, I'm not immune to what people say and think of me. I'm actually very sensitive to it. But it's also understanding that, you know, there's only, I guess there are priorities in life, right? So I'll do my best in those situations. And then I also need to walk away from it and say, what's important to me is my family and what they're going through, and focus on that. How do I start to understand that part of my life? A lot of it was actually since we lost our first child, and I think it was starting to understand that, you know, when we lost most of what we had in Zimbabwe and I had to move around, I always felt like I'd been through so much as a young guy that I understood everything in the world, and I understood what it was to go through hard times, and that, you know, no one would understand how tough my life was. Therefore, you know, I just felt, you know, superior in some ways. I was so naive, and that's because I think the longer you live through tough times, everyone's going through their stuff, right? And as I said, I mean, one of the biggest eye-opening moments was when we lost our child, and you start to understand why some people might struggle day to day on certain things, and that's when it got me starting looking to enneagrams, because the way my wife reacted to the way I reacted was so different. And once again, with my life has rules. Why is she acting that way? And it's nearly like not understanding your partner is actually quite a dangerous thing. And I think that's probably why some and don't go well, when the chances of you not staying together after losing a child, or as we have now, someone a child with special needs as such, is really high. And I think when we started to understand that we were going through a different journey, whether it's just grief or just the way we are as people, we react to different things, and the way we have ambitions and goals, the way we try to achieve those are very different paths. And when we started to understand how each other thought about that, it blew my mind, and I dove into Enneagrams. I love Enneagrams because I now talk to people like, oh, they look like a 6 or they're a 9, which I know what probably drives them as a person. Now it's not a gold, you know, it doesn't cover everyone. Like I read it, not every element of being a 1 is me. Most of them are, right? Because everyone's slightly different. But it just lets you know that people are very different, and they have different ways of thinking and different drivers around them. So that's probably what got me into the whole, um, you know, helping understand myself better. Um, and also knowing that that whole being really negative about everything that I'm doing, I question everything I do, everything that I've said on this podcast, I'm going to question myself about it later today. That's just who I am. But knowing about that is normal for me, and being more positive about that instead of worrying about everything to the point of not sleeping for the next 4 nights, there's the difference. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. I totally get it. So I'm actually waiting for the text message later on, or the WhatsApp from you, just to say, Gareth, can you take this part out, please? No,
Probably not.
I'm only joking. But what was the different reaction like? Or how did your wife react differently to how you reacted when you lost your first child?
So when it happened, I was it was completely unexpected. It was a near perfect pregnancy, and then what went from a painful shoulder when she was 34 weeks pregnant, it went to 12 hours later, her liver ruptured and we lost our child. Um, and I guess my reaction was solve a problem. I
Mm.
need to solve this. I need to help this. So I actually nearly shut my emotions off. I just went on, fix it. So the first thing I did was I picked up the phone to whatever counselors I could find or whatever. And I found a charity, Pedals, who were amazing. And I was like, I need counseling. We need counseling. We need to fix this. We need to help us get through this period. Um, and when it happened, we were told that we had lost our child, but my wife very nearly died. So when that happened, I kind of broke down. I'm someone who's I've cried very few times in my life, um, due to things happen in your childhood. Lots of counseling, fine. But I sat in that room and I was in a family room on my own for a good few hours while she was in surgery, not knowing whether she'd live or die. And I had to make decisions of what they could do, what they couldn't do. And there was very few updates. And I just kind of spiraled. I've never spiraled like that in my life. Where you process all the kind of thoughts and
scenarios and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. What might happen in my life? What has happened? And it was devastating. I think that's a lot of flash. I still get that feeling, and I remember that time in my life. And then when she finally came around in ICU a couple of days later, and thankfully she's alive. She's had her own struggles through all of this. And I was a full-time carer for a while, and finally, got her back up on her feet and all the rest. Now, the reason why we went through the same thing, but completely different experiences. So she doesn't remember anything after that because she was out. She was surgery. She was in ICU. She had to get off the drugs for 3 weeks and then slowly recover. Whereas I was already processing grief through that phase. So when we finally talked to a counselor, and this is where it was really eye-opening, we sat there explaining what we were feeling. I was going through the grief process. Now, granted, you go through cycles, but I kind of sprint through them. I go through them again and again and again and again, whereas my wife is a lot slower going through it. And I think when you realize you're not on the same page, now this is not quite a personality thing, but we're not on the same page, you end up being like, well, why can't you just do this? Well, you just need to accept that this has happened. It's not that easy. And you start to understand different people will go through the same experience, and have a completely different reaction to it. And just giving them the space and being kind to them is so valuable. Hard to do all the time, but so valuable.
Yeah, but I think what you've touched on there is actually maybe the reason that so many people do end up getting divorced, because they don't actually understand that their partner is very different to them. Their life experience is very different. Sorry, yeah, it's very different to them, and they're their own person, and they react in a different way, and they're feeling a different thing, and they've got a different personality type. They are actually different personality types, and we can fit into sort of a category, and yes, the more we can understand that, and what our partner is like say in a stressful situation or whatever it is, then the almost more prepared we can be to make sure, okay, cool, I now understand why you're reacting the way you react, because this is in your personality, so therefore it just makes things smoother. Not easy, but at least you have a better understanding.
Yeah, I mean, to use this as an example, which is it's not always the easiest to talk about, but my wife is a rock star. Like, she's super mind. Like, she went to a really good school in America. She's American. Finished near the top of the class in a really good public school. She went to Cornell and Ivy League. Finished near the top of her class. The valedictorian, whatever you call them, and then she went to Oxford for an MBA, and once again got a distinction. And anything she ever tried to achieve in her life, she excelled. So it's one of those, if I want to do this, I just do it and I win. So she did a lot of 4-H, which is in America, so a lot about showing animals. She's got trophies, national trophies. Nearly anything my wife committed herself to, she excelled at. If she planned for something, she achieved it. So when you plan to have a child and everything goes smoothly, and then it doesn't, all of a sudden it's out of your control. And for the first time, probably in her life, when she has set a plan, it didn't go to plan. And it's then managing that. Whereas that's so different to my experiences growing up. Whereas I wasn't the best at everything. I was good at a few things, but I wasn't the best. And I made lots of plans that didn't work out. And I'm not saying that made me better prepared, but it just meant our process of grieving, going through that process, was so different to each other. Um, and look, we're still going through it. It's 5 years on, and we're still going through. There's still some tough days, but yeah, just different.
Sure. I just can't even begin to imagine what it was like going through that. You talk about like how you parent now, right? How you do. Uh, is this something, say, that you and your wife spoke about? Like, or does she parent quite differently, and you sometimes find, oh, I wouldn't, I wouldn't do it that way myself, especially with your personality type. The number one
Yeah.
perfectionist sort of thing.
Honestly, we're pretty well aligned. Um, we also have a relationship. We talk very openly with each other. Like, if things aren't great, you say it. If things are great, you say it. We're there for each other, through thick and thin. Which honestly, it's huge to have that, because it's as soon as you start keeping quiet about things, you bottle it up or you act out, whatever. In terms of parenting, there's always that struggle of the way I was parented. I feel like that's the gold standard, and the way she was parented, she feels that was. I mean, we both turned out okay, right? So I think nearly everyone comes in, so long as you feel like you had a decent upbringing, that's what you bring to the table. And I guess in a marriage, you have to learn that you need to find a new gold standard for your kids, because you'll do things that they'll probably resent you for when they're older, as probably everybody has with their parents. But at the same time, you also have things that you really cherished about what your parents did for you. So we tried to pick and choose between the two ways we were both brought up, and say, well, that's what we want for our kids. And look, it might not be perfect, but it's what we're doing. And we both have to set each other right a few times. Probably her setting me right more often than the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the lesson for me in a lot of this, like, is like, and I literally am a broken record, but I think like communication, man, it is the most important thing in life. Like, it doesn't matter if it's your partnership, your marriage, your friendship, your work. Like, if you can get your communication sort of right, then there's no like misunderstandings, or like, oh, you don't know where you stand, sort of thing. Like, if you can be open, honest, and like kind with how you deliver things, you don't have to be like a pushover, that's for sure. But yes, the less sort of animosity and misunderstandings there are, um, the the easier things can be. But it's not always easy to speak, and also people are not good at speaking. We don't practice it a lot, and we're scared of reactions. And it's like, yeah, but I do think communication is like such a sort of like healer if we can get it
Yeah.
right.
And to be honest, it's often the question you ask. So quite often the way somebody reacts is not about something you're doing, whatever it is. It's the question you ask. So I think that was the biggest thing with that counseling. When I set that up, like, I'd never been to counseling in my life, but I was like, need to fix this. And to have her in the room, it was, even though we talked very openly, even before that, we never fully understood what we were going through. We just were going through something different. But the way the counselor asked the question made us answer it in a way that was like, wow, can't believe my spouse thinks that way. Right. But now I completely get why she's acting the way she is. So it's knowing the right question to ask, not just talking openly. And I think we'll never be perfect at it, but we'll keep trying. Right. And thankfully, we've already had our eyes open enough. We understand each other a lot better because of what we've been through. And so we can ask the questions, or try to. So
Yeah. So you wrote to me, right, a little bit about, say, your story and stuff, and this kind of part that I'm going to read out now sort of is a nice sort of platform to kick the sort of rest of it off, right? You wrote, my point is this: from the outside looking in, people might see our lovely countryside home, the fun personality, which is genuine, but what many people struggle to understand fully is that everyone goes through their own challenges in life. And quite often, when someone is acting out at work or in a conversation, the lashing out normally isn't personal or because of you or the work. And I think that's a great lesson within itself, right? Always understand that, you know, you're only seeing the kind of tip of the iceberg. But what happened to you was like 2 years ago, sorry, a year ago, you guys had twins.
Yeah.
And once again, your wife almost lost her life and you almost lost both kids that night. So do you mind just sort of speaking a bit about that, what happened there?
Yeah. So basically, anybody living on this side of the world, there was a huge storm on the 21st of January last year. Just to remember the date, the peak of the storm was 11 p.m. and they were born at 10:45 or something. So, um, my wife, because of what happened with our first son, Arthur, she's been watched like a hawk for all her pregnancies, just because something might go wrong at any minute, right? And she fainted a few days before. I mean, once again, pregnancy went very, very well. A few days before she was in hospital before that date, she fainted in the house. So rushed her off to hospital, and they ummed and ahed about what she was going through. And then she fainted again in the hospital, and they said, "Okay, we need to just deliver these kids." But because of the complications she had, um, placenta accreta stuff. They basically had to put her under general anesthetic, so they couldn't just get the babies out and move on. They had to get her under general anesthetic. So because of that, it was a bit of time, and basically our son, his heart rate really dropped to the point where he just didn't have a heart rate. So when the babies were delivered, they were delivered seconds apart from each other. They honestly thought my wife was going to make it. We kept talking to the doctors. They actually, the look of their faces walking around the hospital the next few weeks were just like, you could tell they were shocked she was still alive. They thought they'd lost her. She lost 6 point something liters of blood
What?
during the whole thing. So it was very touch and go. Now, if we weren't in hospital, if they weren't watching her like a hawk, none of them would have lived, obviously, because it all happened so quickly. But they basically managed to save both kids. But our little girl, who came out okay, our little boy did not. So he didn't have a heart rate for 18 minutes and didn't take his first breath until 33 minutes. And that's from delivery. So we don't know how long he didn't have a heart rate before that. But anyway, they were in ICU, NICU for a long time. Our little girl has done amazingly. Born 3 months early, so they're born at 28 weeks. And generally, when you talk about twins being born early, you always minus a week because they develop because they're so a bit smaller because they're twins. So it's the equivalent of a 27-week birth. Our little girl, who's now one, what's today's date?
10th
So
of April.
tomorrow, age corrected 1 year old, but she was born in January, so they're born 3 months early. So she's doing amazing. I mean, she's being discharged by everyone because she's just done strength from strength. You'd never know she was even preterm. Whereas our little boy has a lot of brain damage, and that's from just not having oxygen. So perfectly healthy child, born 15 minutes earlier. And I say that because after 10 minutes of oxygen deprivation is the start of brain damage, and at 25 minutes they wouldn't survive. The stress levels found, they do a bicarb test of our child when he was born, was the highest that you get these legal experts, witness experts who are doctors, neurosurgeons and stuff like that. We talked to neuro, forgotten the title, but she said she had never seen a number that high, and she deals with a lot of these. And so he was one of the most stressed. He probably was very close to the 25-minute mark of not surviving at all. But it also means he's got a lot of brain damage. So we've just been living that. And I think everyone who we talked to in the beginning were like, you have no idea. You can see a terrible brain scan and they end up being perfectly fine, nearly. Like, so just keep hope, keep hope, keep hope. And it was one thing after another. After 2 months, he still didn't swallow. And then another month passed, he still didn't swallow. You're like, that's the next reaction you're hoping for. Because if he can swallow, there's so much more that he can be fed. He can be fed, orally and all that. And yeah, just one thing after another. So, I mean, that's kind of the story of what happened a year ago. The start of it, of us living in hospital, which is an hour's drive away from here. So.
Yeah, but wow, man, it's I don't know. Yeah, just very, very difficult to hear that. And I was just wondering, like your perspective on life, I guess in general, how has that changed? you know?
My perspective on life. Wow. Um, so when we lost our child 5 years ago, I kind of changed I was doing very well with work. So I kind of started in the startup world. So I quit that last job. I got a degree in sustainability because I got a bug for sustainability anyway. And I started in startups and I kept getting, it was the same kind of fund that was funding a lot of companies. I kept getting promoted and bounced around these companies for a little while until the fund poached me. And I was just working relentlessly. And I got to the point of I'm loving it. But when I say I'm loving it, I'm loving that I'm doing well in my career. But that family balance wasn't really there. And so when we lost our child, I kind of decided, you know what, it's not worth just running yourself into the ground for money. That's not what life is about because, I'm fit and able today. I can do stuff today. Like I want to, if I can have a family and blessed enough to do that, I want to embrace that because that's time I'll never get back. So we moved to Northern Ireland during COVID because I could work from home. I decided to work 3 days a week. Meant I had a lot more quality time with my wife. And actually, when COVID hit, we were in lockdown. My wife's recovery went through the roof because all of a sudden I was at home a lot, and there was a lot more care. And yeah, literally, her physical recovery was incredible after that. It was so quick in comparison to what it was before. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the way I've been living. I mean, it's a hard question to answer since then because I mean, with everything that's gone on, um, I mean, I took 9 months off work at one point with our toddler, to raise him, to take a break from work for a little while as well, and then this happened with the twins. Yeah, hard question to answer since then. I think it's been a balance of we now have to keep a household income for three kids. My wife is doing some consultancy, but it's pretty hands-on. I mean, we got a child with a lot of needs. He was in hospital for 13 months, with a few visits, and that's three different hospitals. And he finally came home 5 weeks ago. He's had 7 visits to the hospital in 5 weeks. We have had to rush him in for all sorts of things. He's the most complex child, I believe, in the Northern Trust. So it's not. We have a little hospital in the house. It's not easy going. So even with my wife working a lot, well, she still works, right? Does a day or two a week if she can. But it's just hard question to answer. What I've changed right now is just living every day as I can. Get through the next day, get through the next day. Life will not always be like this. So I don't want to waste 5 years of my life just surviving. So I wake up every day saying, what can I do with my kid today? How can I have fun with each of my kids, and make his life as good as I can? Because we know he won't have forever. He might only have a week left. He might have another few years. So let's just make the most of each one of those, but by also not neglecting my other kids, right? So we want them to have a positive childhood. But that also means trying to juggle work. And it actually is very, so we talked about this, I can't remember if it was on the podcast or the chat before, but sleep becomes secondary. I mean, I probably averaged 5 hours sleep most of last because my wife was mainly with our kid in hospital, which meant I had two kids, one who was under a year old and the other who's a toddler who doesn't like sleep. Sleep is just not in his vocabulary. And so I just had minimal, very broken sleep every night and just got through every day, trying to make the most of it. So sleep is kind of if I get it one day, fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I'm just living day by day, trying to be in the present. It's really daunting to look too far in the future because so many potentials negative things could happen. So just trying to live each day as it comes. And like I said, from the outside looking in, people looking at our lovely country home and the fact that we work 3 days a week. Now, for any parent out there who is a stay-at-home parent, you'll know it's probably a lot harder to be at stay-at-home than to be at work. Actually, work is a lovely break. So when I do work, that's my break. But we've chosen this because we really want that for our kids. The most, I've forgotten what it is. I think it's the first 3 or 4 years of your child's life, like is probably the most important for that future growth for them to make sure that they feel secure and happy and all the rest. And we are very fortunate that we can afford to work part-time and have the kids the rest of the time. But it doesn't mean it's easier.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah.
I think it was I had Dr. Bruce Lipton on, and he says it's like the first 5 to sort of 7 years are those like their real growth that kind of sticks with them throughout life, you know. And yeah, I'm a big believer in, you know, holding on to your kids, especially in those years, because the influence that you can have on them is profound, you know. And I mean, just that's almost like that protective influence too, you know. They feel comfortable to be themselves, um, and they can learn from you as an adult. I think you are really giving your kid this sort of like very upward trajectory in terms of their overall development. The more they actually spend around you as a parent in their early years. So, but yeah, it's definitely not super easy being a working from home parent either.
Yeah, no, completely. And I actually recently our church put together a group, and we had a guy who did child psychology type stuff when he did his PhD, and he walked it through and actually blew my mind in some areas because I think everyone focuses on what you can do, you know, what we're doing, working part time, being really involved, giving them a solid foundation, make them feel secure and comfortable, and all that. But what really struck me is there's research to show that one of the most impactful things to your kids is actually how you react with your partner in front of your kids. And that blew my mind. We're going through an unbelievably stressful time in our lives. And that means sometimes we get, you know, upset, right? Now it's not that we have big shouting arguments. We're not that type. But at the same time, kids, they react to the way you feel, the way you are with each other. So we've tried to be a lot more focused on being kind to each other. And if you have something to say, wait till your kids are asleep. And that's not easy. But it really won't, you know, there I am trying to do everything for my kids. And I might not actually be doing everything I can do because there's more you can always learn. So I'm sure I'll find out something next week that I'm not doing right. But as long as I feel as long as I keep trying to improve, I can I can at least say I tried.
And that's a good lesson, hey, like to learn that, because at the end of the day, your kids are really sponges and they do what you do and they see you doing things, and like, you know, they see you talking badly to, you know, your wife or, you know, their mom, and they'll kind of repeat it. And you'll wonder, where's that come from? And then you don't actually realize your own actions, you know, and that,
Yeah.
yeah, these are all
Uh,
great things to learn.
and it could be as simple as, why aren't you doing the laundry? It's just like, there's no please and thank you, which you make him do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, it's just that bit of frustration, a simple sentence that, now, interestingly, our kids are too young to really understand the whole forgiveness and all the rest. But even as they get older, um, you know, quite often parents will argue, but they only settle it when the kids are asleep. So the kid sees the outbursts, but they don't
Mhm.
see the resolve. And so it's one of those, I found that really fascinating. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easily fixed. And especially if you're a parent whose kids are already older, you can't really go back and change things. And, you know, um, I always think I turned out okay. My parents weren't perfect. My wife turned out okay. Her parents weren't perfect. Look, we had great parents, but no one's perfect. But yeah, one more thing to try out, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Listen, I just wanted to quickly ask just a couple more questions, you know, because this has been very helpful, I'm sure, you know, for anyone listening. If someone did want to sort of get in touch with you, is there a way to get in touch with you? Um, and
Yeah, sure.
yeah, and what are you excited about, like in your own life that you have coming up?
Right. So, look, I'm on LinkedIn, Laurence Blair. There are very few Laurence Blairs out there, so you know, you'll probably find me. Um, I guess it actually does answer a bit of your question earlier. What am I trying to do? So I've been, for the last 5 years, I've been turning around startups. Um, One was just, you know, because of COVID, the fund was not doing well, and they said, look, we got one of these companies that's really struggling. Do you want to give it a go? And I took it on, made it profitable in 6 months, and sold it. in 18 months. And it was a huge boost of, wow, I can do this. So I went from problem solving of fixing factories to problem solving for companies as design managers, development managers, and then working for a fund. And then now I'm fixing companies. Like I never dreamt of being a CEO, but I found out I was good at it. And all of a sudden, with that life experience of having lost a child and all the rest, I was also a lot better at managing people because as you had read out, that's what I wrote to you on a message. Like I don't when somebody has a bad day or doesn't do work or whatever it is treating them with the respect that they might be going through something that I don't always see. Because I can't imagine everyone goes to work hoping to do a bad job. People go to work because they want to do well, they want to excel, they want to have a good family and work-life balance, um, and so yeah, I think through all of that, I've been dealing with a lot of companies that have been going through troubles, and that's painful work. So with all this happening, I actually didn't want to deal with a company that had failed. And there was one of the investors came up to me saying, "Look, I found one in sport. It's not sustainability, but I know you love sport. What about giving it a go?" And I just thought, you know what? I'm going through so much. I'd rather do something I'm just passionate about. And so I mean, since I've joined this company, it has been so much fun. Like every day I wake up going, who am I going to talk to today? I mean, I talk to the likes of like Mark Wood and if you know your cricket, you know, Mark Wood, Liam Plunkett, Jenny Gunn. Like, I talk to these guys. I mean, one of the top biomechanics researchers in the world, Mark King from Loughborough University, he's our founder. I talk to him pretty much every day. I've got everyone I talk to, whether it's our technologists or couple of consultants. We got, you know, Kevin Shine and Paul Farm. Sorry, I can name them all. I get so excited every single morning just to work. And it doesn't matter. It does matter what my salary is. But, you know, it's not just about the number. It's not just about, I'm no longer trying to save the world for sustainability because I think everyone's trying to do that. Now, I'm now just chasing my passion. Um, and that's a lot of, you know, I get a lot of joy. Now it is a small company that's growing and should hopefully grow very quickly. But yeah, that's what I'm currently focusing on and I'm excited about because that I can see a huge future. Um, you know, with this, yeah, I mean, I'm wearing the gear because I wasn't sure where this podcast was going to go, if it's going to be more personal or on work. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, 100%, buddy. Yeah, I think it's awesome for people to sort of see that, you know, you can get excited about your job and like, you know, the feeling is different and probably the results are different as well. You know, if you super just excited to wake up and go,
Yeah.
cool, what's happening today?
Yeah. Do you know what it is? I mean, I got into sustainability 2012 just because I was asked to fix that factory. And what I realized was I'm good at this. I'm good at solving problems. And also sustainability was still kind of, unless you're doing solar and a bit of wind, it wasn't really a big thing. So I kind of got on early doors. It was great. Nearly everything you came up with was a new idea, new, exciting. Everyone wanted to do it. And I loved that. I love being part of that buzz. But I was good about it because it was new, fresh, and exciting. It wasn't something I was passionate about. I liked just solving problems. That was it. Now I'm getting up every morning going, you know what, I just love being around sports people and talking about sport all day, every day. I mean, I've never been nervous talking to a businessman. You know, talk to a very wealthy person. I treat someone, whether they sweep the floors or run the company, I treat them the same. And I love that, right? Because we're all people. We all go through our own stuff. First time I met a professional cricketer, I struggled to speak because I think I always grew up dreaming of being a professional sportsman, right? Being from Africa, we were always outside. So, I mean, it was so, I was like jittery and like scared to talk. I mean, but it's all, yeah, it's great fun. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, that's cool. You probably were like me and you had like all these cricketers and I don't know about rugby players, but I had rugby players as well, like on my wall at home, like, you know, posters of
Mm.
them and
Don't know if you can see it. I've got most of the South African players from 1995 on a rugby ball behind me,
oh wow,
and the
cool.
cricketers are on one bat behind me there as well from Zimbabwe. So yeah, no, exactly the same. I mean, they're still on my wall on this call.
That's cool,
Yeah.
but so and my last question is what does being ridiculously human mean to you?
To be ridiculously human, I guess to be ridiculously human is kind of whether you are focused on your family life or whether you are trying to take over the world from a financial perspective or whatever it is, we all go through the same emotions. We're all human, whether you've got physical disabilities or whatever it is, um, we're all human, and we got to treat each other as humans, right? Knowing that we're all going through our, whether struggles or joys, and trying to find common ground with each other. I mean, me and you, Garen, we whether it's being from Africa, whatever, there's that common ground. And it's just trying to find that and work through it. I mean, that to me, that social element of just being understanding and with each other, that's ridiculously human.
And that's awesome, because that's almost why like I do the podcast, because we are like so connected and so similar, we just don't even kind of realize it. And especially in this day and age, but where there's, I don't know, everyone seems to be at each other's throats for stupid reasons, because you are so cultish in your, I don't know, politics or whatever the story is, and it's quite jarring, and it's not a good place for us to be in, because I think our similarities are kind of, much more similar than we might think. So yeah, man, I just wanted to say like thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. And it's I still don't know what you've gone through in your life, and what you're going through now. And I can imagine even talking about that is hard. And but there's once again, talking about similarities, there's probably a lot of people that are going through this. So it's going to be extremely helpful for other people to just hear your perspective and how you deal with things, and how to get through it, So yeah, man, just thanks for reaching out on LinkedIn as well. It's I've got this kind of new approach now where if someone like sort of suggests to be friends on LinkedIn, I'll accept and then message them straight away. And that's what this resulted in. Like you and I are sort of connecting, like which is awesome. I think we should use our platforms that we have to sort of bridge that gap from digital to in person. Not that we've met in person, but this is a good step. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, completely.
Because we have this great way of being able to connect with people these days and find out about each other. So yeah, thanks for your time and sharing your story, but it's super helpful.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
Pleasure, man.
Cheers.